Hi there. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be doing an analysis and valuation of Norsk Hydro. So let's get started. Norsk Hydro is essentially a Norwegian-based company that turns natural resources, aka alumina, into resources that is aluminium and recycled products as well as hydropower. So they have more than 30,000 customers worldwide. They operate in 40 countries and they are producing a lot of tons of alumina and aluminum and recycling a lot of that too. Now, their main inputs here are bauxite, alumina. They also use that to convert it to the primary aluminum, to castings, to extrusions, and to products, right? Like cans, all the castings that go into the extrusions that go into cars, the castings that go into other materials, right? So their inputs are often a whole lot of water, caustic soda, bauxite, lime, coal, and oil, and a lot of land that they have to use for that, and electricity, of course. So those are their primary costs to produce all of this. And hopefully they can recycle a lot in order to have less of a carbon impact, carbon footprint, but also to hopefully save up money when they're doing that, right? If you recycle products, that's more energy you save up in extracting the raw resources of it, right? To make the aluminum. So the green transition will essentially drive a lot of aluminum demand. We know that the car is going to turn electric, and there are many aluminum extrusions per car, or just the material aluminum is in plenty of cars. So that will only really go up, and that has only ever gone up here, as you see in this chart. And as electric vehicles demand that, there will be even more demand for that. However, that is the long term. So we know they have clients in the long term. They have a market in the long term, right? But how about nowadays? So their industrial segments have had really weak development, actually. Their extrusions and the automotive demand has been a little stable, but everything else, look at distribution, look at industrials, look at transport, everything else has not been great. The reason why, and look at this market growth per quarter, where it's gone down in the latest quarters of 2023. 2023 is going to be down overall. 2024, it's barely going to grow, especially, and it's only going to grow in North America, not even in Europe, right? So they have some weak developments lately. So we can see here in their financials that in the year 2022, they earned 39 billion Norwegian krona, right? In quarter two 2023, for example, they earned 7 billion. And in quarter three 2023, this number is almost half of that. It's 3.9 billion Norwegian krona, right? Which compared to quarter three 2022, exactly a year ago, it's terrible, right? It's pretty much almost a third of that number. So these numbers show an overall decline, as we were showing, a decline in development and demand, right, in the market. So they're clearly being affected by this. And this is another reason why this is happening. The raw material costs in 2023 are going up. Almost everything except maybe the cost of caustic soda is pretty much up, right, from previous quarters in 2019, 2021, 2020, and even 2021, right? So I am going to grab all of this and do a discounted cash flow model. Now, 2022 was a very different year because there was a lot of demand for everything. And you can see that their free cash flow was about $2 billion in 2022. Every other year, their free cash flow has been much less. It has been closer to the 1 billion mark. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm basically going to say that they're going to generate a little more than 1 billion, and then I'm going to grow that number by about 2%. So, and then I'm going to grow that by 2% for perpetuity, right? And then I'm going to have a required rate of return of 11%. That's 1% more per year than the overall market, right? So over time, that is going to add up to be a whole lot, right? I'm going to divide that by the total number of shares out, and I'm going to get a fair value of equity of $5.94. However, we have to subtract the overall net debt that Norsk Hydro has, and that gives me a fair value of $5.41 after discounting this $1 billion in debt that they have. So $5.41 with this 11% rate of return and 2% perpetual growth rate. Now let's see where Norsk Hydro stock is at. So interesting. Here we see maybe some cyclicality actually, where there's a down cycle and an up cycle and maybe another down cycle here, right? Norsk Hydro is a stock that's trading at a P ratio of around 20 actually, given the latest earnings. Of course, earnings went down, so the P ratio went up. They have a huge dividend yield of 9.44%, right? That may be a little deceiving. Who knows if it's a little variable, right? So I wouldn't invest on it purely based on the dividend, especially if they're struggling recently. Well, then maybe they won't grow the dividend much. But it is interesting that they're returning value to shareholders like that, and they do buy back shares. So they're at least returning some value to shareholders there. But you can see this down cycle into this up cycle, right? Where there was a whole lot of demand for that in 21 and 22. And they could just do it and do it and do it. However, as inventories accumulate, right, and as the demand weakens a little bit, you see them going through some pain, right? So these levels, well, right after 2020, we may not see these levels, but don't be surprised if you see it somewhere over here, right, in the $3 mark instead of $5.45. Do I know that this will happen? No, but is it possible? Absolutely. Don't be surprised, right? So in short, let's talk about this. So forecasting for lower earnings due to an oversupply of inventories and some pain in input costs, as we were seeing, Norsk Hydro is about fairly valued, right? We had $5.45 for the Norsk Hydro ADR, and my discounted cash flow model gave me $5.41. So it's basically there, right? And this is a little bit of a conservative cash flow model, but you can add a margin of safety on top of it if you really feel like it. Now, some metrics have been improving, right? Norsk Hydro is a profitable company. Right now, they have a pretty high return on invested capital, while others have been showing signs of concern. Just overall revenue, right? The top line has been decreasing after an extravagant 2021 and 2022, right? Overall, aluminum seems to have a cycle, and following that cycle is going to be very important, right? If there was an upcycle recently, then there's a down cycle right now, but there may be an upcycle later. We were seeing that the overall demand of aluminum is expected to increase, right? During the green transition, with electric vehicles, etc., right? The pain may not be over for Norsk Hydro, but the long-term demand is simply there, right? And thankfully, they're diversified a little bit with hydropower, for example, which is probably keeping a lot of their earnings in place, right? Even if the price of aluminum goes all the way down, the demand for that, they at least have that hydropower sector to sort of hold that together. So what would I say? I would say this is fairly valued, but if it goes back to the prices we saw here between 2019 and 2020, I would be very interested, right? So that's what you do with fairly valued stocks. If you think it's a quality company, right, which this is one of the largest aluminum producers in the world. If you think this is a quality company and you're interested and it's currently fairly valued, put it in a watch list, wait a little bit, and see if it happens. See if there's a price that you're interested to enter the stock at, right? So the last thing I will say here is learn the inputs and the cycles, right? Learning the cost of the inputs for Norsk Hydro and the cycle for aluminum will help you a lot knowing when to invest and when not to invest. And that will be the key with a lot of these commodities companies, right? With a lot of these producers of materials that are used by other companies, right? So when you want to invest in Norsk Hydro, you need to learn about the inputs and the cycles. With that said, I thank you so much for watching. If you want to see any more videos like this, feel free to like and comment and tell me which companies you want me to look at. I'll be happy to look at them. With that said, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.